This is your host, Ronnie Fernandez, LCSW, licensed clinical therapist and owner of Ronnie Fernandez Therapy, but for guys. If you want to know more about me and my private practice, go to ronniefernandez.com. Hello and welcome to Mindset, the Guy podcast, where men talk about their life challenges and how they were able to overcome them. My goal with this podcast is to help men better express their thoughts and develop a mindset to better deal with their life challenges. This podcast is not clinical therapy. The men that I interview are not my clients, but have great stories on how they were able to develop a mindset to conquer their challenges. I'm not a professional interviewer or host, so please forgive me for all the pauses, and misplaced words. With that being said, let me introduce you to my next guest. All right, Rich Cook, right?
Cooks, yes.
Cooks.
Yeah.
Rich Cook. I'm always bad with the names.
That's
Always
fine.
bad with the names, man. Me and Rich we've known each other for a long time now. I mean, we go back to I was 20, 22, 23 years old, kind of working at a nonprofit called Boys Town. Um, a nonprofit was like a shelter for kids, and we worked together. Watching these kids that were either removed from their home, they were they were removed from their home, or they were coming out of juvenile hall, psych hospitals, and we would get everybody from the county, from LA County. So we would get people from Compton, from Riverside, from even a couple from Orange County, and they were brought to us in a 16-bed facility, and we had to provide them with shelter and some sort of skills. And we had to deal with a lot of their behaviors.
A lot of behaviors. We deal with a lot of behaviors.
So, Rich, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself quickly? Just your background, your education, and kind of your experience.
All right. So I'm Richard Cooks. I'm an associate social worker right now. I graduated from USC with my master's degree in social work in 2016. I've been in this field for about 20 years. I'm currently working at Starview Community Services, which is it's a for-profit, but we're a mental health agency. And I'm a therapist, and I also supervise staff there now. So I have a caseload of kids. I teach anger management groups, parenting groups, social skills groups for kids. You name it, I probably do it.
Wow, that's a lot of great experience, and we've both been in the field for a long, long time.
Yes.
And now we're kind of we met together. When we first met, we were both single and kind of finding our path. And now that we're older and have kids and kind of in the same stages, we I think we see a lot of the common things that are going around in society, and so we can talk a little bit about that. But I first want to talk about, like, you kind of growing up and how you got to to where you're at now. So can you tell me a little bit about your background, like where you grew up and where you grew up?
So I grew up primarily in between Compton and Long Beach most of my life. During the 80s, 90s. Grew up in relative poverty. My mom worked sometimes 2 or 3 jobs to support our family. My father struggled with addiction for up until I was probably 21 or 22. My father struggled with addiction. So we grew up in poverty. I have 3 siblings, so I'm number 3 of 4. But one of the things that always kind of shaped me was education. Even when my father was kind of in our lives, he always pushed education. My mom always pushed education. There was no excuses allowed in my house. There were times where our lights got turned off, and she would light a candle, give me a flashlight, and make me do my homework. And so then I began to realize that although my parents financially couldn't provide me with certain things, education could take me to a better place. And so education was always enforced in my home, even despite sometimes seeing my mom not eat so me and my brothers and sisters could eat. And that really motivated me that I wanted to do better. And that was always the message that she gave me. Like, I made choices about life, but I want you to do better than I did.
Wow. And what is that? What set you a difference from other kids in the same kind of similar circumstances, where that, like, appreciation? Do you think, or do you think it was something else, or?
It's funny because I've asked myself that question a lot over years. Like, why was I different? Growing up in the same neighborhood, why did some of my friends choose a different path? How was I able to make it out where some of my friends that I grew up with are still stuck in that cycle of poverty, addiction, were lost to gang violence? And I think it was just what I got from home. Even though like I said, my dad struggled with addiction, and my mom has a high school education, so she didn't go very far in her education. But they always told me that I'm not a product of my environment. Just because we grew up in poverty, just because certain things are happening in our neighborhood, you better not do that stuff. And it's funny because like my mom during the time I grew up in Long Beach, a lot of her relatives and her cousins, they were pretty big gang members in the city of Long Beach. But even them, they saw me out like, no, you better go home. We're not gonna have you
Yeah.
out in the street. So like the neighborhood kind of protected me as
Mm.
well.
Yeah.
And I got into sports probably in middle school, and I would always have my basketball in my book bag with me. So even like some of the gang members in the neighborhood, if I tried to stay like, nah, get your basketball, go home, you're not. So I was kind of protected. I think that was what it saved me really.
That's funny you say that because that's what I got a lot too with football. With football and baseball, where I would have my helmets or I'd have like something that I was playing baseball, and it was like, oh no, you don't belong here, or you need to go ahead and move on, or just like words of encouragement from gang members or whatever, and it was just like, yeah, and that respect with the uncles too. The uncles would be like drinking or smoking or whatever, and even with cousins kind of my age or younger than me, and they're like, no, you're not going to be a part of this. And so, do you think that's one of the big things is finding some sort of identity, finding some sort of thing that brings you like confidence and sense of belonging outside of the family?
I think so. I think part of it too was just not getting caught up in a lot of things that were going on in my neighborhood because I knew who I was. And I think a lot of times, especially, and I see this in my work a lot with young men or just young people in general, that they don't know who they are or they don't get those messages from home about self-worth. They look for it in other places. Often that those kids fall easy prey to gang violence. That's a lot of our young women ended up being sex trafficked because they're looking for other things. And I know another thing that helped me was I was allowed to leave my neighborhood.
Mm.
So I never went to school in my neighborhood because I always performed well academically. I was always bused in, for lack of a better word, to predominantly white schools.
Yeah.
So I did get better education. I went to school in more affluent communities. Schools were funded better, smaller student to teacher ratio, and I got a better quality of education. And so I think that was the difference between a lot of my friends as well. And when they did have opportunities to go to these different schools, their parents didn't have the foresight to send them because it was a little bit more difficult. Like for me, when I was in high school, I lived in North Long Beach. I went to school at Milliken and Lakewood or close to Lakewood, and I would have to get up at 5:30 and catch two buses to get to school on time.
Mm.
But I did it every day because I understood the value of the education that I was getting. And I knew that it was a better school. When I had friends that went to the local schools, would talk about fights at school all the time or just the different violence at school, or they would go to school and use drugs, and that didn't occur at my school. So I understood the difference and the value of the education I was getting as well.
Yeah, and the importance of like and my parents weren't perfect either, but they had conversations with me. You know what I mean? It
Yeah,
was more of like my dad used to say, don't do what I do what I say," type of
yeah,
thing. And I know that's kind of been not a good thing, but having the conversation with your kids, even if you're not doing, living the perfect life or whatever, but not being ashamed of it and just having that conversation and building that insight. Do you think?
oh yeah, yeah. I think that with my father, and we're actually really, really close now. I talked to him for a long time last night. He was an example, and he would tell me, "Don't be like me." He was an example of the things that I didn't want to be
Yeah.
like, and that motivated me because I understood like he made the choices that he made, but I didn't have to make those same choices, and
Yeah.
he wasn't going to allow me to make those same choices. And so he was like a cautionary tale. Like
Yeah.
you're at a crossroads. You can either follow your father's footsteps and see the struggles that you're going through, or you can try to make a better life for yourself.
Yeah.
So fortunately, I was able to choose the right path for myself.
Yeah, I think those conversations are so important. I remember my dad, like, he was a truck driver and he would show me his hands and like, look, do you want your hands to look like this? And telling me to go to school and stuff that he's done, and having honest conversations about it, and not becoming too preachy, but having those kind of like, people might have like an awkward like they might think it's an awkward conversation, Um, wow. Yeah, no, it's just weird that the kind of similarities of like those conversations with your
Yeah.
dad, right?
And I think it's important to have those conversations. I think too often, especially what I find in this field, is parents aren't honest with their kids. They're afraid to show their vulnerability to their children and admit that they made mistakes. And I think that for me, although growing up I didn't always understand everything, or sometimes I hated the decisions that my parents made, as an adult I get it now. Especially now that I'm a father, I totally get it, and it understands. I understand it. I know when I graduated undergrad, I was in West Virginia, and my parents flew out, or my mom flew out with my siblings, and I didn't even want to go to my graduation because for me, it wasn't a big deal because in my house, that's what they preach. Like, they didn't celebrate when I graduated high school. I was supposed to graduate high school.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was like, yeah, I was supposed to go to college and finish college. It's not a big deal. I finished a couple of months early, and I was just kind of waiting around on campus for graduation. I wanted to come home, and my mom absolutely wouldn't buy me a plane ticket because I think that was more of a moment for her as well.
Yeah.
And I have a little sister, and she wanted my little sister to see, like, you work hard. This is what you do. And I know I've talked to my little sister because I think that seeing the things that I did was inspiration to her, because after I left for undergrad, I believe she was 12, and by the age of 15, she graduated college and had moved on her own and was living in Hawaii, attending school, all because she saw that I went to college, and I knew I was a role model to her.
Yeah. I mean, being the first one is really, it definitely sets a trail for other. I think it makes things easier for our family members that haven't really seen a lot of like education success, or even just kind of reaching their goals, and seeing those. I think it's a really big thing. But yeah, I mean, I like what you're saying about just the importance of the conversations and the importance of like kind of stuff. Wow. And is there any other people that kind of helped you on your way outside of your family?
Oh yeah, I mean, just growing up, an African American family, like church was always a big thing for us, and so I had people in the church that would kind of talk to me. I wasn't necessarily preachy or about religion, because that I'm pretty sure that would have turned me off as a kid.
Yeah.
But there was the pastor of our church, and he started a basketball team because we had a bunch of young kids in the church. He started a basketball team, and he would be our biggest cheerleader at the games. And he did a lot of activities geared towards youth. And of course, church, so there was a religious aspect too, but that wasn't the focus. The focus was mentoring. And then he started a mentor program, and I was one of the first mentors that he hired. And I'll never forget, I had a teacher at school I went to, because I didn't want to be at the school I was at as a freshman in high school. I wanted to be with all my friends.
Yeah.
And I would kind of sit in the back of class and joke, and then she just pulled me aside one day. It's like, no, you're different from your friends. I'm not gonna allow you to fail. And she would make me sit in the front. It was math, so I hated math. And I'll never forget this small Asian lady, and she basically told me, like, you need to get it together. And she would make me sit in the front of the class, and every day for 4 years when I was in high school, she would check on me to make sure I was doing okay. And if I got a grade that she didn't think I should get in a class that she wasn't teaching, I wasn't even her student anymore, she would pull me aside and talk to me. Yeah. And she kind of, for whatever reason, I don't know why this lady took an interest in me, I have no idea, but I'll never forget that.
Wow.
I'll never forget that. So, I mean, there's people that just help me in some way or another. That I have, friends, moms. My best friend in school was a white kid who played basketball, and he would come to, there was no white people in my neighborhood, but he would come from his neighborhood just because he wanted to spend the night at my house and hang out. And I would go to his house, and his parents would I was like their son.
Yeah.
I was like their son, and then we became really close. So there's just, there's always those interactions and encounters in life that you don't know what they mean until you're mature enough to appreciate them. So I had a ton of people that just helped me that I could never repay. So I repay by the work that I do, and just being that trying to be in that same example to other people.
How has that experience where you grew up, your family life, how has that made you a stronger person to overcome things that happen in your adult life?
I think it shaped who I am as a person, and it's prepared me for anything. So whenever there's a crisis or anything, it's probably not as bad as the things I experienced growing up. But of course, when you're a kid, you don't know that you're poor. because everybody around you is poor. You don't know that, there's certain things that are going on that shouldn't be going on because everybody around you is experiencing that until you're an adult and you kind of look back and reflect like, wow, like I've been through some things. But I know for me, it's resiliency. I'm starting to see that, especially in the work that I do, that a lot of our kids are surprisingly resilient. They go through so much trauma and abuse, and they still choose to make good choices. They still choose to educate themselves. They still choose to kind of persevere. And I know, like I said earlier, I was just always thinking like, what's different about me and like some of my friends that I grew up with. I didn't let what happened to me define me. I didn't let it destroy me. I used it as motivation. Like, yeah, I'm poor now, but this is temporary.
Yeah.
And I had that same teacher I talked about. She kind of just laid it out to me. So, you know what? You're in high school. High school is 4 years. And like she even like drew up a timeline, and that's math. And like the average person lives to like, I don't know, like 75. It's like, look how small of a blip 4 years is. You can do anything for 4 years. Just do what you need to do, and the rest of your life is going to be great. And then she would tell me like a lot of your friends. One of my friends was a pretty popular kid. He was a terrible student though. Like this kid is going to peak in high school. This is going to be the best time of his life. Look how much life he has left to live. Yeah. And that's sad for me to think that this is the best his life is ever going to be.
Yeah.
And that really resonated with me. Like, yeah, this is a short amount of time. So it is kind of worth the sacrifice, not going to the parties, sitting and paying attention in class because I had a bigger goal. Yeah. I had a bigger goal. And a lot of that comes from home. Graduating high school wasn't the goal for me. It was the goal for a lot of my friends. That wasn't the goal for me. It was just a step. And the ultimate goal, I had no idea what I wanted to be or what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to go to college. My older brother and sister went into the military. I knew it wasn't for me.
Yeah.
I had no desire to get up and exercise and be told what to do and wear a uniform. And so I think just a lot of those experiences, it just motivated me, and it shaped who I was. I wouldn't change anything about my life. I wouldn't go back and have a, I guess, quote unquote, better life because I wouldn't be the person that I am today.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Wow. Yeah. I mean, that's spot on. What would you tell somebody that's going through your situation, like 12 years old, same background, same kind of thing? What would you tell them?
A lot of times with the work that I do, a lot of the kids that I work with, the first question I ask them is, what do you want to do with your life? And then, or sometimes I get the, well, I can't go to college. I can't do this. And then the question, well, why not? Just because nobody's done it in your family doesn't mean that you can't do it. And so I share my story, and I'm very honest with the kids that I work with. And it's like, my path may be your path. Maybe you don't like school, college, maybe not be for everybody. But what is it that you like to do? The best advice I ever got is figure out what it is that you love to do and make that a job. Yeah. Figure out how to make that a job. If you like video games, cool, learn coding, make video games. So it's finding your path and not getting caught up in what's going on around you. Sure, things might not be great at home. It's temporary. That's not permanent. It doesn't have to define who you are. I think a lot of kids, what I see, especially in some of the neighborhoods that I work with, their parents have kind of given up. And so, and they preach that to the kids.
Yeah.
They preach that to the kids, or it's, well, you can't go to college because I can't afford to send you. Or there's tons of ways to pay for college. Yeah. You may have to temporarily go into debt, but you sacrifice for the bigger goal. And so a lot of times it's just trying to change that mindset, that mindset instead of the automatic negative thoughts that come with it. What are some positive alternatives that we can develop? How can we turn those cans into cans?
Yeah. It's awesome. Right. Man, thank you, man. Thank you.
No problem.